Hello, and welcome to our tutorials for working with Finesse Gadget Designer. In this video, we're going to explore how we can open up a pop-up window when we double-click any row of a data grid and display the data of that particular row into that window. For this, we can drag a button and a data grid to a frame we've already placed on our canvas. Change the label and the component ID for the button. So in Properties, we're going to change the label to Load Data, and we'll change the component ID to match. While we are here, we can also set up the manual events that will be firing when we click this button. So, go to the Tools tab and select Manual Events. We're going to name our first manual event as Load Data and click Add. The second one is going to be called Load Pop-up Event and click Add Item. Then we can save the manual event. We have to set up the data grid to listen for our manual event we just set up. So click on the data grid and add an action. On the left, select our button, make sure the trigger is on click, and select the action Fire Event. On the right, select the manual event box and choose our Load Data event. Then click Save. Once the event is fired and the data is loaded, we want our grid to request the data from the service. So click on the data grid again, add an action, and select your data grid from the left. In the Actions field, we'll select the Request Service action and change the service to Java Service and our service's name, which is Show Data. Then save it. The service returns a resulting object, and we need to reference it to fill the data grid. So we select Service Event on the left, which is Show Data, and add the action Fill Data. Then we specify that we want to fill the data from the event data, which is named in our Java class as data, and click Save. When we publish the project to see the result in our output window, if we click the button, the data is loaded into our grid. But now we want a pop-up window to display whenever we click a row in our data grid. So we first have to design the pop-up window. Go to the Designer window and click the Toggle View button in the upper right corner. Your view changes, and we can now design our pop-up. Select a frame component for our frame, and we change the properties of the frame, giving it a title, which we'll name Employee Data. Click Show Header and align it to the center here. Then we can drag 3 text inputs onto our frame. We can change the IDs for these text inputs as well. The first one we'll label as Name, as well as the component ID. The second one we'll name as ID, and do the same for the component ID. And the third we'll name Address, and again, change the component ID to match. While we're here, we want to set up the pop-up window to fire an event when the data grid is double-clicked. So we'll add an event here. From the left, select Data Grid from our frames and change the trigger to On Double Click. On the double click, we're executing the action Fire Event, which will be our manual event called Load Pop-up Event. Then click Save. We also want this pop-up window to be opened as the event is fired, so we need to go ahead and select the pop-up frame again and add an action. On the left, select Manual Event, and this time our manual event is Load Pop-up Event. We'll add the action Open to execute with this event, and then we click Save. Now, once the pop-up opens, we want the name, ID, and address of that particular row that was double-clicked on in the data grid to be shown in those fields. So, select the first text field and add an action. Select Manual Event, and once Load Pop-up Event is fired, we want to execute the action Fill Data with the name field in the event data, which is the selected row. We do the same thing for the second field, except we'll fill the field with the ID of the row selected. And we'll finally do the same for the third field. And for this one, we'll fill the field with the address of the row selected. Then click Save. Let's publish to see the results of our output. After we refresh the page, When we click Load Data, the data is loaded into our data grid. And if we double-click any particular row, the name, ID, and address gets passed to the fields of our pop-up window. If we click another one, the information changes. And that's how we can dynamically load data from a data grid to a pop-up window using events, listeners, and services using Java classes. Thank you for watching.